Hello, and thank you for joining us for this fireside chat. Today, we're going to be discussing cybercrime, AI, and identity. We're going to provide 5 predictions for 2025. My name is Jason Barron. I am the CTO at Cortelligent, and joining me today is Chris Plescia of Mimecast. Chris is the Enterprise Solutions Evangelist. Today, we're going to walk through 1, the evolution of cybercrime-as-a-service. 2, AI, friend and foe. 3, the widening attack surface. 4, rise of cybersecurity-aware culture. 5, and lastly, addressing legacy systems and staffing shortages. Let's jump in. All right, so our first topic is going to be cybercrime business models. Our prediction is that as bad actors settle into the lure of recurring revenue, we're going to see cybersecurity innovations aimed at disrupting this entire network of cybercrime come to the forefront in 2025.
That's a mouthful. I'm just reflecting back to my time in corporate when you had to get everything through procurement. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around how do I go down to procurement and say, hey, I need to hire a few cyber criminals to do, hack the competition or do something, right? How do we get that process through contracts and legal? So, wow, it's an interesting topic. So what trends are you seeing and how is this going to operate like a legitimate business and things that you're seeing as you work with customers and prospects out there?
Sure. So cybercrime as a service and as a somewhat legitimized business model is nothing new. Malware as a service has been around for a long time. DDoS as a service, botnets for hire. None of this is new, but certainly the marketplace is maturing. So you've got companies that are they're offering malicious services and they're offering technical support services along with those, right? They're helping their fellow hackers when they're having issues with their offering. And so you've got other ancillary services that are being added on, like money laundering as a service or law enforcement evasion as a service they're just expanding their offerings and making them more robust. And so that's pretty interesting. And then what you're also seeing is more competition. And so as competition enters that marketplace, you are seeing better offerings. You're seeing offerings become more sophisticated, have more tailored offerings, and more affordable offerings that are more widespread. So more accessibility for less cost.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I think for me, then I start to think, okay, how do you start to predict where this stuff is going to go, right? What vectors or what things are these bad actors and cyber as a service? Where are they going to start to head, and how do we help corporations head that off and stop that from actually becoming a thing, getting in front of them?
Sure. With the proliferation of AI, we're seeing a lot of new offerings begin to emerge on both sides of the fence, right? We're seeing malicious LLMs just in their infancy. We're seeing AI making it cheaper for malicious vendors to create products and to adapt their products and do it much more rapidly. And at the same time, we're seeing security companies using AI for the same thing. They're responding much more quickly to threats. The AI at its heart is an excellent pattern matching system, and so it's able to pick up on more subtle user behaviors and tune into that to help protect an organization. We're also seeing, and I think we're going to see more of this, is public-private partnerships where government agencies and people like SentinelOne, even perhaps Mimecast at some point, they're going to be all working together to try to take down some of these malicious networks.
Interesting. And so for me, I think there's a couple other things that I would add to that. I think as an organization, you got to nail the fundamentals. You kind of have to have this strategy in place, right? Get your user access control, awareness training. You have to educate people about this and get them motivated to take responsibilities and kind of, be always on alert. I always like to talk about people as a perimeter. I don't care how good the tooling is. If people aren't aware, it just takes one click, right? You can't stop the click. So how do you get them at least to go, maybe I shouldn't do that? And this just continues to get more and more sophisticated. And I think we'll jump into that a little bit more. I think the other thing is don't try to do it all yourself.
Right.
So as an organization, be growing up in large global, Fortune 500, Fortune 50, Fortune 10 organizations. Everybody wanted to build it themselves. And it's so complex and so sophisticated these days, you can't stay in front of the bad actors
So
fast enough. So finding that good partner and somebody that you can connect with to kind of help fill the gaps or keep you strong in other areas while you focus on your core and what you're good at. And I think, the other thing that I just think back to just living through the hurricane in North Carolina, right? What's your recovery plan?
right.
How have you never has a tabletop been more important than now? Because you're going to have it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Absolutely.
I think as this happens and how are you going to recover? So nail the fundamentals, partner with an expert, and then, practice this so that you can recover when something goes bad.
I couldn't agree more. I would add, the bad guys only have to get it right once, right?
Yeah.
We have to get it right 100% of the time. So that's a much bigger challenge, and so the organization that wants to protect itself really is, they're fighting the odds,
Yeah.
and so everything that they can do to help their chances is really important. So partnering with the right vendors, as you said, layering technologies to make a defense in depth strategy, hugely important.
Yeah. And I think even as you talk about that, the role of AI, which will actually pivot us to our next prediction where, AI is playing both sides. So when we think about the prediction in 2025, we'll see more companies using AI to strengthen their defenses. I think at the same time, you're going to see the bad actors using AI to strengthen their attacks.
Absolutely.
So trying to figure that balance out and leveraging this to kind of help solve and fight this is going to be really important to what we're doing. For me, one of the things I like to talk about is, improving your time to context. How do you get that understanding? Because things were happening so fast. And to your point, right, you might get 100 through that get blocked, but it's that 101 first or that, that next one that somebody has having a bad day or whatever it is, and they click and it's gone. So how are you, kind of seeing this play out? And what are the things that you're kind of going after in your space?
Just as we talked about earlier, AI is evolving on both sides of the fence. And so what we're seeing is a lot of shift toward behavioral authentication and constant, consistent authentication rather than point-in-time authentication. That's been very important. XDR vendors are starting to build more and more AI into their platform, which is helping to identify threats faster. It's helping to automate the response, and so reduce the amount of overhead and possibility for human error in the SOC, which is great. It's also helping folks like help desk engineers surface information a lot faster and be able to respond a lot faster to user needs, which is great. And so overall, I think we're going to see a much better, much more robust security posture that organizations are able to use as a defense against those bad guys, and probably a lower cost overall.
Yeah. So, a couple of things that I've seen here at Mimecast, that 90% of these attacks start in email, and about 8% of your organization are going to create 80% of the havoc, right? And so what's interesting to me in this AI space is, and we all get, now that it's the holidays, you're getting all these texts that your package couldn't be delivered or your Amazon code needs reconfigured, just log in. It's easy to delete, that's not us. I think what we're seeing on the corporate side, and we've seen this through a lot of our, email compromise and the AI there, is fake email threads now showing up where somebody has either taken the time or somehow figured out who your reporting structure is or who your colleagues are, and they're spoofing the entire email thread and the responses, and then it lands on your desk and it looks like your boss and their boss, and everybody's like, get this done now, and you feel this emotion to react.
They're creating that legitimacy and that urgency.
It's exactly.
Which triggers everybody, right?
And to me, again, it comes down to the emotion, right? It's not here. It's that emotion of, I need to do something right now that actually gets you in your personal life, but at work too, because those lines have blurred. They're no longer work and personal. It's now all there. I think some other things we've seen a lot come through in our recent scans and protecting organizations is going away from the just click here to hey, we aren't going to tell you to click here, copy and paste this URL. So now you're getting that user to take an action on, you're convincing them, well, it's safer if I cut and paste the URL because then I'm not going through their malicious link. And, creating these QR codes, and people are, well, QR code's safe. I can just scan it, which puts a URL, and then I click on it. So it's interesting how that AI is creating all of this stuff. And I think, again, it's emotional. The lines are blurred. What are you guys seeing as you're helping your customers? Are you seeing any other things in that space where, AI is generating new attacks that we've never seen before?
Well, that's why something like Mimecast is so important, because you do have the URL protection and all of the additional layers of protection around that, the targeted threat protection, et cetera, et cetera. And that's huge. And I can't overstate the value of having something like that in place for an organization. Because as you mentioned earlier, so many attacks are email born.
Yeah.
And so many people, especially right now, are so harried in their day-to-day lives, and they don't want to do the wrong thing, but they see something, they click on it, even just to investigate it, and then it's too late. So having something that's going to stop that is very important. I think the newer threats we're seeing, I would say it's split. It's some of the same old threats, but just done a lot better, because AI is now letting people, as you said, they're letting people create much more targeted, well-crafted messaging to deceive people. And with that comes also the next generation things like deepfakes, where you are seeing deepfakes, people who aren't who they say they are in interviews, getting jobs, getting into an organization only for the sole purpose of exploiting that organization. And that is a very scary prospect. And again, on the other side of the fence, you've got technologies coming up to try to thwart those efforts. And you can run, I don't know that we've quite gotten to the point where it's real time yet, but you can run your video through some of these products, and it'll identify whether something is a legitimate person or if it's a deep fake.
Yeah. And for anyone watching, it is me. Ouch. See, I pinch myself, so I'm legit. I'm not a deep fake right now.
Just turn around. Like, turning around is still a tough thing for
exactly.
AI, but it will always be the case.
Yeah. I think another thing that I've seen a lot of in working with literally everybody from, Fortune 1 to Fortune, 500, anywhere within that span, is as you take the AI models inside your organization, your operation, right? When those things can leverage your internal data to learn the nuances, the way people talk and communicate, the acronyms, the abbreviations for everything, it makes it so much more powerful. I mean, we've seen exponential, and I'm talking, 50% plus improvement in efficacy, fewer false positives, fewer things that are going to cause you time away from the things that you need to focus on, more accurate results and protection against your organization. So allowing your data to train these new AI models to then make you stronger, so that when the attack patterns and vectors are coming in, it's like, boy, that's an anomaly. That's not a normal behavior that I'm seeing from the way we run inside. And I think that's equally as important. And that's one of the things we focus on. The more we can tailor that model, that protection model for you that covers everything from, collaboration and email to, governance and compliance, everything around insider threat, and then even all the education and awareness, all of that, as it looks more and more towards your organization, it just gets down, it's exponential strength that you start to see.
All right, jumping to our next topic, we're going to talk about the expanding attack surface. And our prediction is that in 2025, identity will become the cyber watchword, as companies home in on the absolute need to know who they're dealing with and what those users are doing. Identity is really being heralded as the most important aspect of cybersecurity, or the emerging as the most important aspect of cybersecurity. What we've seen is an evolution. Mm-hmm. So it used to be that a password was good enough. Then it became stronger password policies. Now we're seeing the evolution to MFA. We're also seeing the evolution to passwordless authentication and identity. And what we're going to see in the next evolution is that continuous authentication and behavioral authentication that lets you know exactly who you're dealing with. And that's going to come into play not only at the endpoint where you're working, but also throughout the network and throughout the application ecosystem that you're using.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And then the other thing that's going to come to the forefront, I believe, is going to be the notion of the human risk. And I think, Chris, you have quite a bit to say about that.
Yeah. And so I think, great stuff. And I think for me, again, focusing on that human risk, it's the action, the behavior, and how do you have a really comprehensive approach to managing that? And we actually have some scoring where you start to look, and if you think of, on a scale of 0, 1 to 10, 5 is kind of where you start, right? That's home base. And the lower the score, the better. And so I've done my training. I've talked to people. I went to a presentation. I've got all these tools installed, but I click on something. Now, all of a sudden, I went from a 2 or a 1 to a 6.
Yep.
And then, so the key is, how do I get my organization holistically below the threshold of things that are on there? And when I think about that, again, it's the activities, it's that emotion. We start to look at, that scoring across the organization, and you can improve scoring by adding tooling, adding AI, making sure your, business email compromise is solidified, bringing in third parties to look for, zero trust and what's hitting against those endpoints. Or I have other software that's looking for, malicious links and things that are going outbound, or somebody clicked on something. I think you also need to reflect inside as you're doing the scoring and who in your organization is most at risk. And various times of the year, but you've got joiners. So people who are new to the organization, hey, I got my benefits, I'm going to send them to my home email, or I'm moving innocently files or shots of PDFs and things in and out. You've got the leavers. So there are people who are just flat out stealing stuff, right? And they're all of a sudden they're moving a bunch of things to Box, or they're loading up their Google Drive or their OneDrive or whatever it is. How do you detect those behaviors and anomalies that are going on? People who are disengaged, and I don't care how engaged somebody feels or says they are, everybody has a bad day. And if you get hit on that bad day when your emotions are down, you could click on something, you just don't think clearly. And then the last thing I think you need to really focus on are like folks who are overworked. So we're heading into the end of the year, and as a vendor, we see this all the time. Everybody's getting their POs in. You're trying to pay all the bills as an organization, and there's just email and exchange of things and phone calls and text and everything going, hitting that small group of folks in the accounts payable, handling all the POs, trying to get the contract signed, because if you sign by the end of the year, we'll give you a good deal, all that stuff going on. So using that scoring as we understand and see how things are going, and then looking for those personas that are most at risk, those joiners, the leavers, the disengaged, and then the overworked. I think that's all critical to really solidifying this, because that attack, surface and vector just continues to spread, but you also have to look at the human side and underneath it.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we talk about one of our next topics, which is how you deal with some staffing shortages and challenges around that. But certainly you really need to think about the ecosystem, the IT ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah.
And so you've got layers of protection, and as you continue to evolve away from a central office, a centrally managed repository of information, and it all gets distributed to different SaaS vendors, different cloud storage vendors, new partners, et cetera, your attack surface is completely changed from what it was even 2-3 years ago. And so you've got to have integrated solutions that are going to work together and feed back into your SOC to ensure that all of this data is being aggregated and correlated. And humans aren't going to do that. That's where the AI comes in, right?
Yeah.
So next we're going to talk about cybersecurity-aware culture. And our prediction for 2025 is that the value of data for things like strategic planning, competitive comparisons, reporting on metrics, etc., awareness of this is going to give rise to a more robust cybersecurity culture. We can only hope. It really starts with a top-down understanding of how real the threats are and the impact of a breach. And too many companies still think that they're not at risk, or they're underestimating or downplaying the impact of an attack. And that is really problematic. I think more and more now, companies are seeing the news articles, the headlines on their feeds where this company just got hit, that company just got hit. They're getting notifications from companies that their own privacy, their own private information, their own data has been compromised, has been leaked. And so I do think that awareness is being raised, but still too often executives of small companies just think they think they're too small to get hit. And really the opposite is true.
Yeah.
And so it's a question of when and not if. Executive leadership, once they understand and embrace a security first mindset, that's when the company can really foster adoption of cybersecurity culture across the organization. That's where, the policies and the consistent training at regular intervals, that becomes the norm. All of the investment in protection and all the things we've been talking about, that becomes the standard.
Yeah.
And I think, something like the human risk score helps measure that quantitatively. And that's really important. And not only at a point in time, but over time, so you can see how an organization is evolving and is improving their posture.
Yeah. And so I'm passionate about this. To me, it's all about the culture, the relationship with your people, the teams, and what do you do to create this, basically this human risk-based culture of security. And as I think about this, honestly, it starts at the top, right? And there are, but it also has to be embraced. It's spoken from the top, embraced from below as these things come together. And a lot of this is org change management. You've got to have education. You've got to have awareness. I read some things on Gartner. You've got to make it fun, right? And people have to understand what are the ramifications. Well, if I click on something, we get hacked, so what? Right? That's not acceptable. How do we get people to really take it personally and care about what they're doing and making that decision before they click? So I think it truly does start with the culture and that building of education and awareness, growing that human risk-based cultures I talked about. And to me, when we talk about our human risk maturity model and we think about what does that feel like, and you're down reactive all the way over here to where I'm starting to learn a little bit. Now I'm managed in the middle, and now I'm getting a little more optimized, and then all of a sudden I'm resilient. You need to strive to get up to resilient. You can't settle for number 3. I'm halfway there. You've got to really push the culture of the organization to get to those higher levels, because that's where you get the true return on investment. And that's also where you see the highest level of security, the strongest risk posture, and the strongest compliance adherence that you're going to have and when you get up in that upper level. And even the way I talk about this to organizations as I'm out there, or people I'm speaking to, people and their behaviors truly are the perimeter. And so when you think about that, you can have all the tools, like I have all the education, everybody's checked boxes, but it's that action in the moment that happens. And so how do you do everything in your power to get that perimeter solidified and resilient to protect your organization?
It all starts with a gap analysis. It all starts with understanding where your weak points are. And from there, you can create your policies, and then you can implement all the different solutions and the controls you want to put in place. And then what's really, truly important is understanding that it's not a set it and forget it solution anymore. Like, security is just not set it and forget it. You got to run it programmatically. It's got to be something that's continuously reinforced, continuously evaluated. Threats are evolving, technologies are evolving. And so partnering with your vendors to understand what the latest offerings are, why they're important, how they're there to help you is what's going to get people there.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. And programmatic and as-is and designs and policies and everything, there's a lot of skills baked into that. And I'm sure every organization has just people sitting around waiting to write policies and do some scanning and do some reading of logs and everything. I'm just curious, you're in a offering that brings that support to organizations and helps them fill those gaps and everything. What are you truly seeing out there? What's your pulse on where the world is going right now with regards to these skills?
Sure. Well, that actually leads us nicely into our next topic, which is really around staffing crisis and the legacy systems that folks have to support. And so, kind of to your point, you may be surprised to learn that companies don't have a whole bunch of cybersecurity professionals at the ready to start jumping in and managing these programs. And it's actually quite difficult to find these people.
Yeah.
So the stakes are higher now.
Yeah.
And the compliance requirements, the applicable fines, risk of litigation, and brand exposure, all of these things are now coming to the forefront of executives' minds. They're realizing, like, oh my gosh, this is so risky. If we are compromised, what do we do? And so they're starting to think, well, I need to find somebody that can help me with this. Quickly, they're realizing that that's not so easy to do.
Yeah.
It's not so easy to find these people. And how do you really know when you're interviewing a cybersecurity professional? If you're not a cybersecurity professional, if your business isn't cybersecurity, how can you properly vet these employees? And then how can you bring them on and keep them happy and trained and evaluate their performance? It's very, very difficult for a company who's not in that space to do that. And that's where a company like Wortelligent comes in, right? We can come in, we can bring that talent to bear for our clients.
Yeah.
And we're taking care of all of that, right? And we do have a team of experts, and we are able to evaluate talent, and we are able to keep them motivated and trained and all of that to help deliver on that promise for our clients.
Yeah. Very cool. And, for me, it's kind of, now I know, shocker, I'm probably going to date myself a little bit here, but I think back to Y2K.
Sure.
And all of a sudden there was a scramble to get these mainframe developers to make sure that the world didn't collapse in 2000. And then it just seems like there's just a constant step, right? You went from there, and then all of a sudden we needed IT specialists and engineers, and then you needed data scientists, and then I needed, InfoSec people and everything. And so I think it's good that you guys are in a position to help organizations, because you can't be an expert at hiring all of those things. No matter how hard everybody tries, you just can't. And so getting that expert help, I think, is critical as you think forward to that. So what are some of the things that, what do you guys bring to the table? How do you help organizations? Because, to me, you don't think about staffing. It's like, oh, we've got it posted. And they're like, well, yeah, those have been on, whatever job board for the last 8 months.
Sure.
And which is already about 7.5 months too long. So what are some of the trends and things you're seeing in this space, along with organizations not being able to just find the right people?
Yeah. So, we're able to bring in a managed SOC and a managed compliance solution for our clients. What we also are doing, just as other companies should do, is we work very closely with our security vendors, people like Mimecast, and the entire stack of security products that we help leverage to protect our clients. And so we're working with people that are on the cutting edge, that are doing the research and bringing all of this new technology to bear against the malicious attackers. So we're doing that all behind the scenes and internally, and then we're bringing all of that in aggregate to our clients, which is, I think, a very compelling offering for folks. But as you alluded to, the Y2K issue, there are still companies that have a lot of legacy systems. Mm-hmm. And that's another major challenge that people are going to have to address in 2025.
Yeah.
This is the low-hanging fruit for attackers, right? Once they get in, once somebody does make that errant mouse click that results in an attacker gaining access, the next step is, how are they going to pivot? What are they going to do from there?
Yeah.
And if you've got systems that aren't patched because patching isn't even available anymore, and there are known exploits for these systems, they're going to find them and they're going to exploit them very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And so it's incredibly important for folks to understand, if you have a mission critical system like that, one, is it possible to upgrade it?
Mm-hmm.
Can you get it to either a modern technology, modern underlying infrastructure that is secure, that is maintained by the vendor, that is patched, et cetera, et cetera? That's step one. Is that possible? If that's not possible, well, how are you going to defend that specific technology? So now take the approach, all right, somebody's inside of my network. What could they do? right? Somebody has the credentials of one of my users. What could they do? Or they're able to get an administrative credential. What could they do?
Yeah.
How could they access this? And what damage could they do? And what does that mean for our company? Right. And that's the mindset that people have to take. And we help them with that all the time.
Awesome. That's awesome to know. And for what it's worth, I can still do COBOL and assembler, just in case in a pinch, right? For anybody who's still got, and for most of you, you have to Google that, but trust me, you'll understand what it means.
So we've covered a lot in this conversation.
Yeah.
Of the 5 predictions we talked about, which do you think will have the most immediate impact on mid-market businesses, and why do you think that?
Yeah. So for me, I go back to the culture one. Personally, I think you've got to create that culture. And, as I talked about human risk management, it's that comprehensive approach designed to protect your organization from the risks that arise due to human actions, behaviors, and errors. It's people, people, people.
I can't agree more. I think that the staffing challenges are going to be very, very difficult for companies to overcome.
Yeah.
And legacy hardware or legacy or legacy software can be upgraded.
Yeah.
But it's much harder to upgrade people and
Yeah.
find the right talent with the right skills.
Yeah.
And then looking at as we're approaching 2025, what steps do you think businesses can take today to prepare for the cybersecurity future that we've been discussing?
So for me, I kind of look at there's kind of a 3-pronged approach that we've all heard of machine telemetry, right? The zeros are the ones, how many logins, what's moving where on the network, how are things working? I think, looking at what's your people telemetry, again, back into that human risk score and how educated are people, what are they doing that's good and bad? And how do you, for lack of a better term, reward and coach when things don't go as planned? And then the last is what I'd call that compliance telemetry, or the policies and the procedures that you have in place to help mitigate and monitor and control all of this space. So to me, if you can get that nailed down with the telemetry, you've got the foundation, you've got the tooling in place, you've got the adherence that you're going after to try to make things work, then I think, again, you've locked down that perimeter as best you can.
Yep. The only thing I would add to that is, for the coming year, partner closely with the right vendors and keep yourself informed. Truly understand what's going on out there and see how these security breaches are impacting companies, and not just any company, but companies in your space, how they're impacting you personally as companies that you're doing business with, personally or professionally, are being breached, and they're sending you these notifications. Like what does that mean to you? And keep that in mind and put yourself in your customer's shoes if that was to happen in your business.
Yeah. The last thing I'd then say is, what did we miss, right? What if we had this conversation, good conversation exchange, what are those unexpected things, the risks, the opportunities that are out there that the predictions and organizations might overlook?
Companies that really understand security and compliance, they understand that it can be a business driver and a differentiator. And I don't know that a lot of businesses think of it that way, but the ones that truly understand it and the ones that value it, they're the companies that are going to be able to come to their clients and provide assurances that their data is going to be safe. And they can not only provide assurances, but they can back them up with quantitative and qualitative data to say, here's what we've done, here's what we've seen, here's what we've built into our processes. This is our cybersecurity posture. Companies that are upfront about that and transparent about it, when you're doing business with these folks, you feel better about it. And that's going to come to the forefront, and they're going to be better positioned to work with more clients in their marketplace versus the company that kind of downplays it and dismisses it and doesn't take it seriously. They're going to be unprepared to answer those questions when they come up in due diligence questionnaires, which we see much more than ever. And unfortunately, they're likely to be breached, bear the costs of those breach, both, financially and reputationally.
Yeah.
And so we'll be less able to compete.
So, hey, this has been really good, but it looks like we've got some questions that came in from the audience while we were chatting here. So the first one says, for organizations already stretched thin, where should they start when it comes to implementing proactive cybersecurity measures for 2025?
In my opinion, I would say, and I think we alluded to this earlier, start with a gap analysis. So understand what you're up against and know where you are in your journey and how you're going to get from where you are to where you want to be. You don't want to start trying to throw just a bunch of solutions from, whatever you've been hearing, whatever buzzwords, and trying to get those crammed in without a strategy around how they'll all integrate, how they're all going to truly help your business with your business strategy and with your security strategy and provide a holistic defense. So start with a gap analysis.
Yeah. And I would build to that. And again, I talked about the maturity model, and you'll see our maturity model kind of coming out on this. But as you assess where you're at, where do I want to invest in and how fast do I want to grow to get into that optimized and resilient state? And as I look at that again, knowing that your greatest return on investment and your greatest protection of both your people and those corporate assets happens to that right side of the curve. So, don't go cheap, because you can pay, hundreds of thousands or $1 million or $2 million now, or you can pay hundreds of millions later when the regulators come after you. Right?
And also something to consider is not every organization has the same risk posture, right? And so if you're in a regulated industry, you might be dealing with one set of risks. If you're dealing with financial data, if you're dealing with healthcare data, versus in a manufacturing environment, that your set of risks are going to be significantly different, right? And so really also being sure, again, don't throw a bunch of solutions at something, tailor it to your business and your vertical and your strategy and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. The next question says, what key metrics or KPIs should mid-market executives focus on to measure their cybersecurity readiness and progress effectively?
Sure. Well, we've talked about one quite a bit, which is the human risk score. That's really important. And it's not just about looking at the score at a given time. It's really about the trend as well. So making sure that your trend is up and to the right? You're doing better time over time after each campaign. So scores from cybersecurity awareness training, the output from vulnerability scans and penetration tests, all of that together is providing a lot of quantitative data that you can look at and appreciably notice from time to time, from instance to instance, how it's changing and making sure you're establishing a positive trend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good stuff. I really don't have anything to add other than, again, it's how do you get that pause before I click? It's just that memory muscle or the finger muscle, I guess, right? How do you pause before is this the right thing? Not just when somebody's looking, but when nobody's looking. Am I doing the right thing? The next question, can you say more about how you would protect my data if it was used to train the models?
Sure. So that comes back to organizational policies and having the right controls in place so that your employees know how they should be interacting with AI and with these LLMs. And so if you're putting solutions in place within your organization, as long as you're using any of the main vendors that have a reputable offering, they're going to be putting up boundaries so your data can't automatically be exfiltrated into the public LLMs. So their value add is that they're able to combine what's in the public LLM with your organization's data without having that breach and exfiltrate. And that's really, really critical. So that's the question to ask as you're evaluating vendors, certainly, is making sure that your data is safe and it won't be used anywhere publicly, and that your employees understand what their boundaries are when it comes to using.
And I think to kind of build on that a little bit, for me, again, I talked about that efficacy and accuracy just as exponential when you can train this to your model. And as you said, the questions you need to ask that vendor around how they're using AI, how it's protected, what are who's got role-based access into how are you shielding it from everything else? How are things anonymized and aggregated are all critical things to look at in that vendor that's supporting you. And so for me, when I look at that, I think, you have to build that trust with that vendor. And, we've got an AI pledge, right? We are building that trust and commitment by saying, here's everything we have, and here's how we're doing it, and come kick the tires, right? You can see how it's locked down so that we're protecting you and your identity while we're making you stronger and better and more accurate for what you're trying to accomplish. And so that's kind of how we roll, but you should expect that from your vendor. And there's one last question here that I see is everybody touts AI these days. What are ways to go deeper? And how are companies using it? How is it legit and how is it protected and trusted? It says, I'm tired of the hype. What do you suggest?
It's an excellent question. Well, chances are you probably don't want to become an AI expert yourself. So really what you need to do, as we've talked about before with security as well, it applies to AI. Find a good partner that is an expert, that does have that expertise, and work with them. Ask them the questions that are on your mind, and maybe evaluate a couple vendors and just see how, where their responses diverge, and understand what the differences are there. And I think that's really important. People shouldn't feel a pressure to become an AI expert. Again, this isn't your core business. Unless your business is AI, or unless your business is IT security, you don't have to become the expert. You don't have to build the expertise within your organization. Focus on what your business does, and leave that to a partner that can really help you in that journey.
It's funny because even within organizations that are providing AI solutions, not everybody does AI. There's a finite group of individuals who are PhDs and experts and behavioral scientists and people who are really good at that, and they manage and control and drive that. And so I think that's a great point, right? You need to test this. And I think there are a series of questions to ask that AI vendor on how they're doing things, how they're managing it. Do they have that trusted pledge, that commitment to what they're doing, not only to build their models, but how are they using your data? Because even the models, if not built right, could introduce things that you don't want. So there's got to be trust in the organization, their culture, and what they do. And then trust, if I give you my data, how do I know that it's okay? And then what's the benefit I get? Which, as I talked about, is, it really is, just takes the ROI and the protection levels up so much more,
right,
to the fiber of who you are and how your organization works.
Yep.
With that, I think that's all we have today on the questions and the topics. And again, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah.